In the seemingly peaceful town of Meadowbrook, Amara Jackson, a bright black teenager, becomes the target of escalating harassment. Her father, Malcolm, a man of quiet strength, has always preached patience and resilience. But when the abuse turns violent, something in Malcolm breaks. As he delves into the hidden power structures of the town, he uncovers a chilling conspiracy. His investigation begins to shake the town's foundations, and what Malcolm does next will leave Meadowbrook reeling. A gripping tale of buried secrets, fierce love, and a father's relentless fight for justice. Unbroken Silence will leave readers questioning how far they would go to protect their own. In the quaint, seemingly peaceful town of Meadowbrook, Amara Jackson, a bright and resilient black teenager, finds herself the target of escalating harassment. What starts as subtle taunts quickly spirals into a vicious public attack that leaves her family reeling. Her father, Malcolm, has always told her to endure, to rise above the hatred that's been part of their lives for generations. But after the assault, something inside Malcolm changes. Known for his quiet demeanor and unshakable patience, Malcolm suddenly begins to act out of character. He becomes obsessed with uncovering the truth behind the tormentors, delving into the dark corners of the town's powerful elite. As his behavior grows more unpredictable and secretive, whispers circulate that he's planning something dangerous, something insane. Neighbors fear what he might do next, and even his closest friends begin to question whether he's lost control. But Malcolm isn't unraveling. He's unearthing. What he discovers is far more sinister than simple bullying. A conspiracy that links influential figures in the town to unspeakable crimes. As he gathers irrefutable evidence, Malcolm sets a shocking plan into motion, one that will expose decades of corruption, abuse, and cover-ups. What Malcolm does next will stun the town and change the lives of its residents forever. In the face of injustice, he chooses not violence, but truth, and the reckoning that follows will shatter the fragile illusion of Meadowbrook's harmony. Unbroken Silence is a gripping, emotional thriller about a father's fierce love, a community's buried secrets, and the lengths one man will go to protect his family. Filled with shocking twists and a heart-wrenching moral journey, this powerful novel will leave readers questioning the price of silence and the power of one voice to break it. Malcolm Jackson, a tall black man, 45 years old, with long shoulders, gray hair, and deep, tired eyes. His face traces the lines of a life spent working hard and enduring silent battles. He always dressed in work boots, ripped jeans, and a flannel shirt. Malcolm grew up in South Africa during the civil rights movement, raised by a country that taught him the importance of patience and perseverance in the face of racism. She moved to Meadowbrook for a new start, hoping to protect her children from the harsh realities she faced. A skilled carpenter, Malcolm is known for his silent strength and reserved nature. However, the attack on her daughter awakens many wounds, raising her spirit in ways that she did not know she was capable of. Amara Jackson physical description. A 16-year-old black girl with dark brunette hair and curly natural hair who usually wears her hair with expressive brown eyes. Slender and tall, her posture radiates resilience despite the weight she carries. Amara is an intelligent and creative teenager who dreams of becoming a day laborer. She was always mature for her identity, having two unspoken preconceptions around her, but determined not to let them define her. She has a small circle of friends and frequently takes refuge in her art and writing to escape the tension she feels in her predominantly white school. The bullying that she endures becomes more than just adolescent cruelty. It is a reflection of racial animosity in the city, which she has long felt, but now faces head-on. Physical description of Maya Jackson. Just over 40 years old, Maya is Malcolm's wife, with smooth hair, dark brown eyes, and gentle eyes. Her warm smile and soft voice often mask the exhaustion she feels balancing work and family. Keep your hair in a natural, combed style. History. Maya works as a nurse in the local hospital. It was discovered by Malcolm when they were both young, and they bonded over shared dreams of a better life. Pragmatic and pay no chow, she frequently acts as the emotional anchor of the family. She supports Malcolm's decisions, but is increasingly concerned about his erratic behavior. Maya plays a crucial role in prompting her family to confront the truth of what is happening in Meadowbrook. Physical description of owner Daniel Hawkins. a 50-year-old white man with a robust build, thinning hair, and a thick mustache. Its extremely strong and athletic structure was soft over the course of 2 years, but its blue eyes were still projected by authority. Frequently dressed in his Zarif uniform, complete with a long ABA capu. Born and raised in Meadowbrook, Hawkins saw the city move, but remains steadfast in his traditions. He is aware of the darkest side of the city, but prefers to maintain peace through silent shelters instead of real justice. He initially dismisses Amara's murder allegations as teenage drama, but when Malcolm begins to dig deep, Hawkins becomes more involved, attempting to keep the city's secrets buried. Caroline Beecham physical description. A rich white woman of 55 years old with golden blonde hair, impeccable style and piercing green eyes. She is slender, always dressed in Greif's clothes, exuding sophistication and power. Caroline comes from one of the oldest and most influential families in town. She runs several business ventures and is a member of the town council. Beneath her charm lies a ruthless desire to maintain her family's control over Meadowbrook. She plays a key role in organizing the attack on Amara, as she sees the Jackson family as outsiders who undermine the town's image. Jackson House description. A modest two-family home located on the outskirts of town. The home is filled with personal touches, family photos, Amara's art, and signs of Malcolm's craftsmanship. It is a place of refuge for the family, but becomes a tense environment as Malcolm becomes more withdrawn. Meadowbrook High School description. A predominantly white high school with wide, sterile walls and large windows that provide a well-kept campus. The school is a social battleground for Amara, where she tries to combat harassment and isolation. It symbolizes both opportunity and oppression for her. Town Square description. The heart of Meadowbrook, with a mix of 4 shops, cafes, and the imposing courthouse that towers above it. This is where the Pueblo's residents gather for events, and where the Pueblo's outward charm hides its deepest, darkest secrets. The square became a pivotal site in Malcolm's eventual public exposure of the Pueblo's corruption. Malcolm drives through the quiet streets of Meadowbrook, replaying Amara's breakdown in his mind. He passes through the wealthy part of town, including the Beecham estate. His thoughts whirl between protecting his family and his growing anger at the town's injustice. Amara's confession forces Malcolm to realize the true nature of the town. Effect. Malcolm's contemplation leads to the decision to dig deeper into the people behind the harassment, setting him on a path of investigation. Emotional beat. Malcolm finds himself torn between his old philosophy of resistance and a new desire for action. Confronting the school administration, raising the stakes. The next day, Malcolm and Maya go to the school to confront the principal. The meeting is tense, with the administration downplaying the incident as kids being kids and showing reluctance to punish anyone involved. Major hints that Amara needs to fit in better. Malcolm stays quiet, but his anger subsides. Malcolm and Maya want immediate action in the wake of Amara's harassment. The school's dismissive attitude further alienates Malcolm, solidifying his belief that the system is rigged against his family. Emotional crash. Malcolm feels powerless in the face of authority figures who refuse to protect his daughter, which pushes him further toward drastic measures. Malcolm's investigation begins. First steps, summary. Malcolm visits the town library, researching public records about the families involved in the bullying. He begins to connect the dots about the town's power structure, discovering that Caroline Beecham and her family control more than just local businesses. They also have influence over the school board and the police. Malcolm's growing suspicion leads him to investigate further. He uncovers the town's hidden web of influence, realizing that the bullying is more than just random bullying. It's part of a larger system of control. Emotional crash. Malcolm's fear is replaced by determination. He now sees the scope of the problem and begins to formulate a plan. Tension at home, character development, summary. Back at home, tensions between Malcolm and Maya escalate. Maya wants to approach the situation through legal channels, but Malcolm insists that they need to protect themselves because the system won't help. Amara overhears the argument and feels responsible for the strain on her parents. Malcolm's investigation is taking a toll on the family's emotional stability. Amara's guilt deepens, and Maya begins to question whether Malcolm's approach will make things worse. Emotional beat. The family dynamic is strained, with Malcolm distancing himself and Amara feeling trapped by her own situation. Secrets and Shadows Scene 1. The Unlikely Ally, New Character Introduction, Summary. Malcolm meets a retired journalist, Samuel Grady, who used to live in Meadowbrook but left after uncovering corruption involving the Beecham family years ago. Samuel reluctantly agrees to help Malcolm dig deeper. Malcolm's investigation has hit a dead end, and he needs inside information. Samuel shares files and evidence about the Beecham family's past misdeeds, strengthening Malcolm's resolve to expose them. Emotional breakdown. Malcolm gains an ally, but also a clearer view of how dangerous his fight against the town's elite will be. Amara's turning point. Amara's emotional arc. Summary. At school, the bullying escalates. Amara is physically attacked by the same group of students, and this time, she fights back. The principal suspends her, blaming her for escalating the conflict. Amara feels completely abandoned. The school's refusal to protect Amara has emboldened the bullies. The suspension is the final straw for Malcolm, who now knows that the system will not protect them. Emotional breakdown. Amara hits rock bottom emotionally, and Malcolm's growing anger reaches a breaking point. Malcolm's decision, the turning point. Summary. After learning about Amara's suspension, Malcolm decides to take matters into his own hands. He begins planning a way to expose the town's secrets with the help of Samuel. He quietly gathers more evidence and begins to build a way to reveal it publicly. Amara's suspension cements Malcolm's belief that he can't trust the system. Malcolm's investigative work intensifies, and he begins taking risks to collect damning evidence. Emotional beat. Malcolm crosses a moral threshold, shifting from passive to active resistance to the city's power structure. A dangerous game. Malcolm's ascent. Malcolm breaks into a local business owned by the Beecham family to steal documents that Samuel suggested. Inside, he finds incriminating evidence of corruption, including illegal deals between the school board and the Beecham estate. Malcolm needs hard evidence to expose the town's elite. Malcolm's risky actions push him deeper into dangerous territory. Emotional crash. The thrill of success is overshadowed by the growing danger, and Malcolm feels the weight of his family's safety on his shoulders. Caroline Beecham takes notice. Raising the stakes, Caroline Beecham discovers that someone is snooping around her family's business and becomes suspicious of Malcolm. She quietly pulls strings, using her connections to have him followed, and warns Sheriff Hawkins to keep an eye on him. Malcolm's investigation has made him a target. Caroline begins actively working to undermine Malcolm's efforts, using her influence to discredit him in the community. Emotional beat. The pressure mounts as Malcolm realizes the town's elite are closing in on him. A fight for Amara. Family tension climax. Summary. Malcolm and Maya have an explosive final argument when she learns about the break-in. Maya is lying that Malcolm's actions will land him in jail or worse. She demands that he stop, but Malcolm refuses, saying he's doing it to protect her daughter. Amara listens and, for the first time, speaks up, begging Malcolm not to sacrifice himself for her. Malcolm's dangerous actions are putting his family at risk. The family's emotional breaking point is reached, but it also brings them closer together as they realize they need to come together. Emotional beat. This scene solidifies the family's resolve, while leaving their future uncertain. Uncovering the truth. The plan in motion. Rising action. Malcolm and Samuel begin leaking bits of evidence to local media outlets and community leaders. At first, this gets little attention, but momentum builds as more people begin to speak out about the town's corruption. Caroline Beecham, sensing a PR disaster, pressures the local media to bury the story. Malcolm's evidence threatens to become public. The town is divided, with some supporting Malcolm and others defending the Beecham family. Emotional threat. The stakes reach a fever pitch as the community becomes a battleground between truth and loyalty to the town's powerful elite. The reckoning. Malcolm's public coming out. The climax. Malcolm, with the help of Samuel, organizes a town hall meeting where he plans to reveal all the evidence. Caroline Beecham and Sheriff Hawkins try to stop the meeting, but a large crowd gathers. Malcolm presents undeniable evidence of the town's corruption, exposing illegal activities and systemic racism. Malcolm's long fight for justice culminates in the public coming out. The town is forced to reckon with its dark history. Some townspeople are horrified, while others try to discredit Malcolm. Tensions erupt into a confrontation between Malcolm and the Beecham family. Emotional beat. The emotional high as Malcolm's truth shatters the town's facade. The aftermath. Caroline Beecham's empire crumbles when evidence leads to legal action against her and others implicated in the corruption. Sheriff Hawkins resigns, and the town faces a long road to recovery. Malcolm's evidence brings the Beecham family down. The town is left to pick up the pieces, but there is a sense of change and hope. Emotional beat. The victory is bittersweet for Malcolm, who knows the fight for justice is far from over. A new beginning. A new future for Amara. Amara decides to transfer schools and pursue her dream of becoming a journalist, inspired by her father's courage in standing up to injustice. The town's transformation gives Amara hope for her future. The family begins to heal, though they remain wary about the future. Emotional beat. The family finds hope in their unity, and Malcolm's actions leave a lasting legacy in Meadowbrook. The bell rang loudly, echoing off the pale walls of Meadowbrook High School, signaling the end of another class. Amara Jackson kept her head down, adjusting the straps of her backpack as she made her way through the bustling hallway. The voices of her classmates blended together in a dull hum, but she could feel the eyes on her as she walked past. She was used to it by now, the quiet stares, the not-so-quiet whispers. When she reached her locker, her breath caught. Spray painted in large, ugly letters across the metal door was a racial slur. For a moment, she stood frozen, her fingers hovering over the combination lock. The laughter from down the hall snapped her back to reality. Turning her head, she saw a group of students, a few she recognized from her classes, snickering and watching her. "Nice locker, Jackson," one of them sneered, his voice dripping with mockery. Another boy bumped into her shoulder, muttering something under his breath. Amara felt her chest tighten, anger bubbling up inside her. Before she could stop herself, she turned and shouted, "Why don't you say that to my face?" One of the boys, bigger than the others, stepped forward. Without warning, he shoved her hard, sending her sprawling to the ground. Her books scattered across the floor. The laughter grew louder. Amara's heart raced, but no one helped. A teacher passed by, glanced at the scene, and kept walking. The weight of the moment pressed down on her. She was alone. Amara pushed through the front door of her house later that afternoon, her hands still trembling from the day's events. The smell of wood shavings greeted her, mingling with the scent of dinner cooking in the kitchen. She found her father, Malcolm, at the kitchen table, sketching out designs for a new carpentry project. He looked up when she entered. "How was school?" he asked, his voice calm, but his eyes probing. He had a way of sensing when something wasn't right. Amara hesitated, the image of the slur still fresh in her mind. But what could she say? Her father had always taught her to rise above, to not let anyone see they had gotten to her. She forced a small smile. "It was fine." Malcolm raised an eyebrow, clearly unconvinced. "Just fine." "Yeah," she muttered, shrugging off her backpack. "Just tired." Malcolm didn't press further, but the air between them felt heavy. He returned to his sketches, but Amara could see the tension in his jaw. She knew he suspected something, but for now, she was relieved he hadn't asked more questions. Amara left the room, retreating upstairs to the safety of her room. The weight of the day settled over her like a thick fog, and as she lay on her bed, the tears she'd been holding back finally spilled over. That evening, the Jackson family gathered around the dinner table, the sounds of silverware clinking against plates filling the room. Maya, Amara's mother, was recounting a difficult day at the hospital, but Amara barely heard her. Her mind was still on the incident at school, the laughter echoing in her ears. "Amara," Maya's voice pulled her from her thoughts. "You okay, sweetie? You've been quiet." Amara glanced up, meeting her mother's concerned gaze. She wanted to tell her, to spill everything that had happened. But when she opened her mouth, the words caught in her throat. "I'm fine, Mom," she said, forcing another weak smile. Maya wasn't convinced. "You know you can talk to us, right? If something's bothering you?" The tension in the room thickened. Malcolm, who had been silent until now, cleared his throat. "Your mother's right. If something's wrong, we need to know." Amara's chest tightened. She couldn't hold it in any longer. It's just school's been rough. Some kids, they've been messing with me. The words felt heavy as they left her mouth, but it was a relief to finally say them. What do you mean, messing with you? Maya asked, her voice sharp with concern. Amara hesitated, her gaze dropping to her plate. They wrote stuff on my locker. Racial stuff. And today, one of them shoved me. Maya's fork clattered onto her plate. What? Her voice was rising, the fury unmistakable. Did you tell anyone? Did a teacher see? Amara shook her head. A teacher saw, but they didn't do anything. Malcolm's face remained calm, but there was something dark in his eyes. We'll handle it, he said quietly. Maya looked between them, her face a mix of anger and worry. No, we'll go to the school tomorrow. This can't continue. Amara swallowed hard. She had wanted to tell them, but now that the truth was out, she felt even more anxious. What if things got worse? Later that night, Malcolm sat alone in his workshop, the sound of distant crickets filtering through the open window. He picked up a photo frame from the shelf, an old black and white picture of his father standing proudly in front of a small house, a man who had survived the segregation era with dignity. Malcolm ran his thumb over the glass, remembering his father's lessons about strength and patience. He had grown up watching his father quietly endure the racism of their small southern town, teaching Malcolm that the best way to survive was to keep your head down and work hard. But now, with Amara facing the same hatred, Malcolm wasn't sure that was enough anymore. He placed the photo back on the shelf and sat down at his workbench, his mind racing. The more he thought about it, the angrier he became. He couldn't sit back and let this happen to his daughter. Not again. The town of Meadowbrook had always seemed like a fresh start, a place to escape the ghosts of the past. But now, those ghosts had found them. The next morning, Malcolm and Maya walked through the wide doors of Meadowbrook High, the sound of their footsteps echoing in the hall. The principal's office was tucked away near the front, a plaque on the door reading Mr. Callahan, Principal. They were ushered in by the secretary, and soon, they found themselves seated across from Mr. Callahan, a man in his mid-50s with thinning hair and a polished smile that seemed more for show than sincerity. Mr. and Mrs. Jackson, how can I help you? He asked, leaning back in his chair. Maya wasted no time. Our daughter has been harassed. Racial slurs were painted on her locker, and she was physically assaulted yesterday. The principal's expression didn't change. I'm sorry to hear that, but... No buts, Malcolm interrupted, his voice low but firm. You need to do something about this. Mr. Callahan sighed, glancing down at a file on his desk. We've spoken with the students involved. It seems like it was a misunderstanding. Kids being kids, you know? Maya's eyes widened. A misunderstanding? She was shoved. They painted racial slurs. We take these incidents seriously, Mrs. Jackson, the principal replied smoothly. But we also have to consider that tensions are high. Maybe Amara needs to find a way to fit in better. Malcolm's jaw clenched. He stared at the principal, feeling a rage building inside him. But he stayed silent, his mind already thinking of the next step. As they left the office, Maya turned to Malcolm, her voice trembling with frustration. They're not going to do anything, are they? No, Malcolm said quietly, his eyes hard. They won't, but I will. That night, Amara sat on her bed, staring at the ceiling. The confrontation at school had only made her feel worse. She had hoped things would change, that someone would stand up for her. But now, she felt more powerless than ever. Her mother knocked softly on the door and entered, sitting on the edge of the bed. How are you holding up, baby? Amara shook her head, tears welling in her eyes. I don't know how to handle this, Mom. It's too much. Maya pulled her daughter into a hug. We'll figure this out. We'll get through it. Your dad and I, we won't let this continue. Amara nodded, but deep down, she felt the weight of the situation pressing harder on her chest. And in the next room, Malcolm sat at the kitchen table, staring out into the darkened street, his mind already turning over a plan. He wouldn't stay silent any longer. The town of Meadowbrook lay quiet under the dark blanket of night, the only sound the hum of Malcolm's truck as it rumbled down the empty streets. His hands gripped the steering wheel tighter than usual, the tension in his body mirroring the storm in his mind. Amara's tear-filled eyes replayed in his thoughts, haunting him. The slurs, the shove, the cruelty she had endured. It was too much to bear. He passed through the well-kept neighborhoods where the streets were lined with large houses, the lawns immaculately trimmed. The Beecham estate loomed in the distance, its grand silhouette a symbol of the town's wealth and power. The place had always felt separate from the rest of Meadowbrook, untouchable. Malcolm's jaw clenched as he drove by, his eyes lingering on the windows where dim lights glowed. He imagined Caroline Beecham, safe inside, far removed from the pain her influence had caused his family. The further he drove, the more his anger swelled. This wasn't just about Amara anymore. It was about something larger, something rotten at the core of this town. A system that protected those with power while turning a blind eye to the suffering of people like him and his daughter. He had tried to be patient, to teach Amara that resilience would carry her through. But now, that didn't seem like enough. His foot pressed harder on the gas as the truck roared forward. Something inside him had shifted. He couldn't stay silent any longer. He had to act. The next morning, Malcolm and Maya entered the polished halls of Meadowbrook High. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead as they made their way to the principal's office, Maya's hand tightly gripping Malcolm's arm as if trying to hold him back from the edge of something dangerous. They were ushered into Mr. Callahan's office, where the principal sat behind a wide oak desk, his smile plastic and his demeanor overly accommodating. "Mr. and Mrs. Jackson, what can I do for you today?" he asked, his hands folded neatly in front of him. Maya wasted no time. "Our daughter was assaulted, and her locker was vandalized with racial slurs. We need to talk about what you plan to do." Mr. Callahan's smile faltered slightly, but he recovered quickly. "I'm sorry to hear about that, but we've already spoken to the students involved. It appears to have been a misunderstanding, kids being kids." Malcolm's fists clenched at his sides, his pulse quickening. He kept silent, watching the way Mr. Callahan avoided eye contact, dismissing their concerns as if they were nothing more than a minor inconvenience. Kids being kids? Maya's voice was incredulous. She was physically attacked. "That's not a misunderstanding." "Well," Mr. Callahan began, his voice calm, "perhaps Amara needs to find a way to integrate more. We've found that students who struggle to fit in often face these kinds of—" "That's enough," Malcolm interrupted, his voice cold and sharp. The room fell silent. "You're saying my daughter brought this on herself?" Mr. Callahan leaned back in his chair, flustered. "That's not what I'm saying, Mr. Jackson. I'm simply suggesting—" "What you're suggesting," Malcolm said, stepping forward, "is that you're not going to do a damn thing to protect her." The tension in the room became palpable. Mr. Callahan's expression shifted to one of frustration, but he didn't argue. He couldn't. It was clear the school had no intention of taking real action. "We'll handle this," Malcolm muttered, turning to leave. "Come on, Maya." As they walked out of the office, Maya whispered, "What are we going to do, Malcolm?" "They're not going to help." Malcolm didn't respond. His mind was already racing, forming a plan. If the system wouldn't protect his daughter, he would. That afternoon, Malcolm found himself in the quiet aisles of the Meadowbrook Library, his fingers tracing the spines of old town records. He pulled out a dusty file and flipped through it, his eyes scanning the names and connections between the town's wealthiest families. The Beechams, the Hathaways, the Fletchers, names that had been whispered throughout the years, names tied to shady business deals, school board manipulations, and behind-the-scenes power plays. He pieced together the web of influence that spread through Meadowbrook like a virus. The same families who ran the businesses, funded the school, and donated to local law enforcement were the ones who controlled the town's future. It wasn't just bullying. It was a calculated effort to maintain control and suppress anyone who didn't fit their mold. His anger simmered as he uncovered more. The harassment Amara had endured wasn't an isolated event. It was a reflection of the town's deeply rooted prejudice, a system designed to protect those in power and dismiss those who challenged it. He snapped the file shut, his mind made up. This wasn't going to be easy, but he wasn't going to sit back and let it happen any longer. He had to dig deeper, find more evidence, and expose the truth. They had hidden behind their wealth and influence for too long. Later that evening, The Jackson house was unusually quiet. Amara was upstairs, lost in her own world, while Malcolm and Maya sat in the living room, the tension between them thickening with every passing moment. Maya broke the silence first. "What are you planning, Malcolm?" He didn't answer right away, his eyes focused on the coffee table in front of him. Finally, he spoke, his voice low. "I'm going to get to the bottom of this. The school isn't going to help. The police aren't going to help. It's up to us now." Maya's face softened with concern. "But what can we do? I don't want you to get involved in something dangerous. We should go to a lawyer, maybe file a complaint with the district." "They'll bury it," Malcolm said flatly. "They control everything here, Maya. If we go the legal route, they'll just cover it up, sweep it under the rug like they always do." Maya bit her lip, her worry growing. "And what if you make it worse? What if they come after us?" Malcolm looked at her, his eyes filled with a determination she hadn't seen in a long time. "They already have. I'm not going to let them take anything else from us." Maya sighed, her shoulders sagging with the weight of it all. "I just don't want you to lose yourself in this." But Malcolm had already made his decision. He was going to fight back, no matter the cost. Upstairs, Amara sat at her desk, staring at the blank page in her journal. Words used to flow easily for her, but now, everything felt heavy and clouded. The weight of what had happened, the way her classmates had looked at her, the cruel laughter. It all sat on her chest like a stone. Her door creaked open, and Maya stepped inside. "Hey, sweetie, how are you holding up?" Amara shrugged, her voice barely above a whisper. "I don't know, Mom. It feels like no matter what I do, it's never going to stop." Maya sat on the edge of the bed, gently placing a hand on Amara's shoulder. "We're going to figure this out. Your dad is doing everything he can." Amara's eyes filled with tears. "But what if it just gets worse? What if it never changes?" Maya pulled her daughter into a tight embrace, her own fear rising to the surface. "It will change," she whispered, more to herself than to Amara. "It has to." But even as she said the words, she wasn't sure she believed them. As the house grew quiet that night, Malcolm sat alone in the kitchen, the faint glow of the streetlight outside casting long shadows across the room. His thoughts were racing, but one thing was clear. He couldn't sit by and watch his family be destroyed by this town. He grabbed a notebook from the drawer and started writing. Names, places, connections, all the pieces of the puzzle he had found so far. The more he wrote, the clearer the picture became. This was about more than just Amara. It was about the system that had been in place for years, one that needed to be torn down, and he was going to be the one to do it. The fire inside him burned brighter now, pushing aside the fear and doubt that had been gnawing at him. He had spent his whole life trying to avoid conflict, to keep his head down, to protect his family from the harsh realities of the world. But now, he saw that silence was no longer an option.